For 7 years, every man in that organization believed the same thing about their boss. They said it quietly, in kitchens and car parks and the backs of restaurants. They said it with pity at first, and then without it. They said a man who cannot make a son cannot hold a chair. 7 years, and not one of them ever asked him. They asked his doctor, they asked his driver, they asked the women who came and went and left before morning. The only person in the world who ever asked him was the woman who made his bed. And what he told her, on a Tuesday, at 4 in the morning, in a room nobody was allowed to enter, was going to end 4 men, 1 dynasty, and a lie that had been running for 7 years. Before we continue with this story, comment where you are watching from and what time is it over there. Subscribe to our channel if you are seeing this for the first time. Now back to the story. Marisol Reyes had cleaned the Barone house for 9 years, and in that time she had learned the whole family through their laundry. That was the joke she made to herself, and it wasn't really a joke. You learn a house from the inside out. You learn who's drinking from the recycling and who's frightened from the bedding. You learn a man's whole marriage from which side of the bed gets slept on. Mari was 35. She was a size 20, and she'd stopped waiting to be a different size somewhere around 31, which had freed up a surprising amount of her life. She wore the uniform because it was the job. Black dress, white apron, flats she paid for herself. She'd come up from a hotel chain in Corona, Queens, and before that from a house in Sunnyside, where a woman had once handed her a $5 bill and told her to have a nice life, in the middle of a Thursday, without warning. The Barone house did not do that. The Barone house paid on time, paid properly, paid the staff's health insurance, and had never once in 9 years shortchanged a single person on that payroll. That was Enzo Barone's rule. Mari had heard him give it, exactly once, to a business manager who'd tried to move the housekeeping staff onto agency contracts. He'd said, "These people are in my house when I'm not. Pay them like it." Mari had been in the pantry, and had heard it, and had never mentioned it to anyone. There were a lot of things Mari never mentioned to anyone. That was the actual skill, not the cleaning. Anyone can clean. The skill is knowing everything and saying nothing. Here is the thing about being staff in a house like that. They talk in front of you. They talk in front of you the way they'd talk in front of a lamp. The drivers in the kitchen, the men waiting in the hall, the cousins who came at Christmas. And in 9 years, Mari had heard the same conversation about Enzo Barone approximately 400 times. He can't. That was the whole thing, said 100 different ways. Since the wife, since the accident, something broke in him. Doctors in Switzerland, doctors in Houston. Nothing works. Poor bastard. 7 years and no heir. And a man with no heir is a man with an expiry date. Mari had heard the drivers laugh about it. She'd heard Carmine Foss's men say it in the driveway with the windows down. She'd heard a cousin at a christening say, out loud, at a table of 14, that Enzo Barone was the last Barone, in every sense, and watched the whole table laugh into their napkins while Enzo sat at the head of it and cut his food. She had watched him not react. Every time. For 7 years. And she had thought, the way you think things in kitchens, with your hands in a sink. Nobody has ever asked him. Not once. In 7 years of that house, with 100 men in and out of it, Mari had never heard a single human being ask Enzo Barone a question about it. They diagnosed him constantly. They never asked him anything. She knew why, of course. You don't ask a man like that. But she also knew something none of them knew, because none of them had ever been in that house at 4 in the morning. Enzo Barone didn't sleep in his bedroom. It was on the 3rd floor, at the end of the East Hall, and it had been locked for 7 years. Except it wasn't locked. That was the thing nobody had checked. It was closed, and closed was enough, because nobody in that house would have opened it on a dare. Mari opened it in her 2nd year, by accident, looking for a linen cupboard. It was a nursery, half finished, a crib still in the box, leaning against the wall with the plastic on, a wall painted 2/3 of the way in a soft green, and a roller still in the tray, gone hard as stone. A rocking chair by the window with a blanket over the arm, and a man's jacket on the back of the chair, and an ashtray on the sill, and a blanket on the seat that had been slept under so many times it had gone shiny at the fold. Mari had stood in that doorway for a long time. Then she closed the door and never said a word about it to anyone. But every Tuesday, when the house emptied out for the standing meeting on Bleecker Street, Marisol Reyes went up to the third floor with a cloth and a basket, and she cleaned that room. She emptied the ashtray. She washed the blanket and put it back folded the same way, over the same arm, at the same angle. She wiped the sill. She never moved the roller. She never touched the crib. She kept the window closed in winter and opened it, 1 inch, in July, because the room went stale, and a stale room is worse. She did that for 5 years. 200 and something Tuesdays, and in 5 years, Enzo Barone never once said anything about it, and neither did she. And the ashtray was always empty when he came back, and the blanket was always clean, which is how, on a Tuesday in October, they finally ended up in the same room at 4 in the morning. Mari was there at 4 because of a burst pipe on the second floor, and a night manager who'd called 4 people before he'd called her, and she'd come across from Corona in the rain in her own car, because that's what you do when you're the one who knows where the shut-off valve is. She'd dealt with it by 3:40. She was going down the east hall with a bucket, past the third-floor stairs, and she saw the light. The nursery door was open, just a few inches, and there was a lamp on inside it. Mari stopped. Every instinct she had, 9 years of them, said walk away. You do not see the boss at 4 in the morning. You do not see anything. Then she heard him. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even really a sound. It was the specific catch a person makes when they've been holding something for a long time, and their body decides, without permission, to put it down. Mari set the bucket on the floor. She went to the door and she knocked on it, softly, twice, which was the single most dangerous thing she had ever done in her life. Mr. Barone. Silence. A very long one. It's Marisol, sir, from the house. I know who it is. His voice was wrecked. Sir, there was a pipe on 2. It's handled. I'm going home. She hesitated with her hand flat on the door. Do you want the light off in the hall when I go? Another silence. Then, you clean this room. Mari's stomach dropped straight through the floor. Yes, sir. 5 years. Yes, sir. Why? She could have lied. She'd had 5 years to prepare a lie and she'd never bothered, which she thought about a lot afterward. Because it was going stale, Mari said. And because you sleep in here, sir, and nobody should sleep in a room nobody looks after. The door opened. Enzo Barone was 44, and he looked like he hadn't been to sleep properly since the second Bush administration. Black shirt open at the collar, no shoes, ink up his throat and across the backs of both hands. He had the blanket in one fist like he'd stood up too fast. He looked at her the way you look at a word you've read 1,000 times and only just noticed. You never said anything, he said. No, sir. To anyone. In 5 years. Not one person in this house knows this room gets cleaned. No, sir. Why not? And Marisol Reyes, 35, in a wet uniform, at 4 in the morning, with a bucket at her feet, said the honest thing. Because they'd have had opinions about it, she said. And you've had enough of those. Enzo Barone made a sound that was almost a laugh, and it broke apart halfway. Then he stepped back and held the door. Come in, he said. You're the only one who's been in here anyway. She sat in the rocking chair because he made her. He sat on the floor with his back against the wall, under the 2/3 of green paint, with his forearms on his knees. Her name was Lucia, he said. Mari didn't say anything. 9 years of pantries had taught her that people who are finally talking do not need you to talk. We were 4 months in. We hadn't told anybody outside the house. He turned the lighter over in his fingers, over and over. She had an appointment on the Thursday, 10 in the morning. She took my car because hers was in for service. The rain came against the window. It wasn't a car crash, he said. Everyone says accident. It wasn't an accident. It was under the driver's side and it was meant for me, and it went off on Prince Street at 10 minutes, and I was in this house, upstairs, on the phone about a shipment. Mari put her hand over her mouth. Sir, they put me under for 2 days after. I don't remember the funeral. He set the lighter down very carefully on the floorboard beside him. When I came out of it, I made a decision, and I've kept it for 7 years, and I've never told a living soul what it was, because there's no version of saying it out loud that doesn't sound insane. He looked up. I decided I was done, Enzo said. No wife, no woman, nothing. Not because I'm broken, because I'm not going to do that to anybody else. Twice. Anybody who gets close enough to me to matter becomes the softest thing in my life, and every man in my business knows to aim at the softest thing. His jaw worked. So I took the target off the board. Mari sat very still in a rocking chair in a half-painted room. And then the talk started, she said. 6 months in, somebody's driver said it in a car park. He shrugged, and it was the emptiest gesture she'd ever seen. And I let it run. You let it. Think about what it does. His voice sharpened, and for the first time she heard the man the rest of them were frightened of. A boss with no heir isn't building anything. He's a caretaker. He's temporary. Men don't move against temporary. They wait out temporary. That rumor bought me 7 years of nobody in this organization thinking they had to hurry. He looked at his hands. And it meant nobody ever came looking for the real reason, which would have led them back to a Thursday in March, and a car and a woman, and I could not have that in their mouths. Not her. He stopped. So I let 400 men decide I was a joke, he said quietly, because it was cheaper than letting them say her name. And Marisol Reyes said the thing that changed both their lives. Sir, she said, has anybody ever asked you? In 7 years, has one person in that whole organization ever asked you what happened, instead of deciding? Enzo Barone looked at her from the floor. No, he said, you're the first. Nothing happened that night. Mari went home at 5:10 and sat in her car in Corona for 20 minutes before she could put the key in. But something had changed in that house, and the whole staff felt it before anybody understood it. He started taking his coffee in the kitchen. Nobody could remember him ever doing that. He'd come down at 6:30 and stand with his hip against the counter while Mari did the flowers, and they'd talk about absolutely nothing. The pipe on 2, the cost of getting the boiler serviced, whether the dogwood in the side yard was dying or just early. He asked her about her mother. He remembered the answer. In November she found him in the kitchen at 7, with the ledgers for the linen company spread across the island, and he slid one across without looking up and said, "You've run supply for 9 years. Tell me why this number is wrong." Mari told him why the number was wrong. It took her 4 minutes. Enzo Barone sat back and looked at her, and said, "Christ." By December, the house staff had started calling her when they needed something from him, because she was the only person who could get a straight answer. And in January, on a Tuesday, in the room at the end of the East Hall, Enzo Barone put his hand flat against Mari's cheek and said, "I need you to understand exactly what you'd be standing next to." "I've been standing next to it for 9 years, Mari said. "Not like this." "No," she agreed, "not like this." And she took a fistful of his shirt and pulled him down. Whatever the 400 men in that organization thought they knew about Enzo Barone, they were wrong about all of it. And Marisol Reyes found that out in a half-painted room on a January afternoon, with the rain coming sideways against the glass. The blanket ended up on the floor. Nobody folded it back over the arm of the chair for 3 days. Carmine Fossi made his move in March, and he made it on the anniversary, which told Mari everything about him she needed to know. Carmine was 58, and he'd been underboss for 11 years, and he had the kind of face that has been rehearsing sympathy in a mirror since childhood. He came to the house on the Thursday with 4 men and a folder, and he sat in Enzo's study, and he was kind about it, which was the worst part. Mari heard most of it from the hall because she was carrying a tray, and nobody stops a woman with a tray. 7 years, Enzo. Carmine's voice, warm as bathwater. Nobody blames you. God knows nobody blames you. But the council has to look at succession, and there's nothing to look at. There's no boy. There's not going to be a boy. You know it, and I know it, and every man out there knows it. Does he? Enzo, you've been telling them for 7 years, Carmine. You'd know better than me what they know. A pause, a slight one. There's going to be a sit-down, Carmine said. 2 weeks, full council. And I'm going to bring a motion, and I'd rather you heard it from me in your own house than in that room. He stood up. It's not personal. It's arithmetic. And what's the motion? Incapacity, Carmine Fossey said. Physical and otherwise. A boss who hasn't left this house in 7 years except for Tuesdays. A man who sleeps on the 3rd floor in a room full of a dead woman's furniture. He let that sit exactly long enough. I'll be calling household witnesses. Mari nearly dropped the tray. Household witnesses. You'll be calling my staff. I'll be calling people who see you every day, Carmine said gently. That's all. Let them say what they see. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. He walked out past Mari in the hall without looking at her, the way he had for 11 years. And that was Carmine Fossey's mistake. And it was the same mistake everybody in that world made. And Mari had watched it happen 400 times from behind a tray. He'd been talking in front of the furniture his entire life. He had no idea the furniture had been listening. The sit-down was in the private room above a restaurant on Bleecker Street, and there were 19 men at that table. Marisol Reyes walked in at 9:30 in a navy dress she'd bought herself, and Carmine Fossey smiled at her like a priest. Miss Reyes, he gestured to the chair at the near end. Thank you for coming. You're not in any trouble. I want you to understand that. Nobody here is going to hold anything against you for telling the truth. Yes, sir. You've worked in that house 9 years. 9 years in June. You'd know it better than anyone alive. I would, sir. Then let me ask you plainly. Carmine turned to the table, playing it to them, and Mari understood then that he'd already run this scene in his head a dozen times. Where does Enzo Barone sleep? 19 men waited. Enzo, at the far end, did not move a muscle. He sleeps on the 3rd floor, Mari said. East Hall, the last room. A murmur went round that table like wind through wheat. And what's in that room? A rocking chair, a crib that was never taken out of the box, and a wall that's 2/3 painted green. Carmine spread his hands to the council. There it is. Thank you, he said. You can see, gentlemen, that this isn't cruelty. This is... You didn't ask me what he does in it, Mari said. The room stopped. Carmine Fossey's smile stayed exactly where it was, and everything behind it went cold. I'm sorry? You asked where he sleeps, sir. You didn't ask what he does. Mari's hands were folded in front of her, and they were perfectly steady, and she had absolutely no idea where the steadiness was coming from. I clean that room. Every Tuesday for 5 years. Would you like to know what's in it? Miss Reyes. There's a ledger from the linen company on the sill, Mari said, and it's a different one every week, because he goes through them by hand, all 4 sets, every quarter, at 4 in the morning. There's a legal pad with the Newark port schedule on it, and 40 pages of his handwriting behind it. There's a phone log. She turned to the table, to the 19 of them. You've all decided that's a man hiding, she said. It's the only room in that house nobody walks into. It's where he works. Carmine's voice went hard. This is sentiment. You said he hasn't left the house in 7 years except Tuesdays. Mari didn't raise her voice. She'd learned that from him. That's true, sir. And I've been in that house every one of those days. So can I tell the room what happens on Tuesdays, or does that not go in the motion? Somebody at the far end of the table said quietly, let her answer. He goes to Prince Street, Mari said. The whole room went still. Every Tuesday, 8 in the morning. He stands on the corner for about 6 minutes, and then he comes home. She looked at Carmine Fossey. 7 years, every week. In the rain, in the snow, the week he had pneumonia. He went, and one of your drivers took him, and I'd assume he told you about it, since your men tell you everything. Carmine's jaw had gone very tight. Prince Street, Mari said. At 10:08, 7 years ago this month, is where somebody put a device under the driver's side of Enzo Barone's car. 19 men did not breathe. And his wife took that car, Mari said, to a doctor's appointment, 4 months along. The sound that went round that table was not a murmur. Carmine Fossey stood up. That's not. Sit down, Carmine, said the man at the far end. That was an accident. It has never once been established that. Sit down. He sat, and Enzo Barone, who had not spoken one word in 40 minutes, finally lifted his head. You want the incapacity on the record, he said. Fine, put it on the record. I made a decision 7 years ago that there would never be a wife and there would never be a child, and I have kept it, and it is the only promise I have kept perfectly in my entire life. His voice went across that table like a blade laid flat. There is nothing wrong with me, gentlemen. There never was. I let you say it because it was cheaper than saying her name in front of you. Silence. 7 years, Enzo said. 400 men, and not one of you asked. And then Marisol Reyes said the last thing. She hadn't planned it. She'd been turning it over since the hall on Thursday, and she hadn't been sure, and she said it anyway. Mr. Fossey. Carmine looked up. You said a room full of a dead woman's furniture, Mari said. In the study, on Thursday. I was in the hall with the tray. So? The crib is still in the box, sir. The plastic's still on it. There's a chair and a paint roller. She held his eyes. Nobody's been in that room in 7 years except me and him. You've never seen it. Carmine Fossey's face did something. It was very fast, and it was gone almost immediately, and every single man at that table saw it. So how do you know it's furnished? Mari said. Nobody spoke. Somebody described that room to you, she said. 7 years ago, before it was closed. Somebody was in that house, on that floor, in the week she died, and told you what was in it. Carmine Fossey said, You are a maid, and 19 men heard the crack in it. It took 4 months to prove the rest of it, and Marisol Reyes was not told the details, and she has never asked. What she knows is that Carmine Fossey's driver in 2019 was a man named Tobin Walsh, and that Tobin Walsh had been in the Barone house 11 times that spring, and that on the second Thursday of March he had been in the East Hall on the 3rd floor at 9 in the morning, for reasons no one ever satisfactorily explained. She knows that Tobin Walsh talked, and she knows that on a Friday in July, Carmine Fossey's chair at that table was empty, and stayed empty, and that nobody at that table ever asked about it, which she understood by then was how they said certain things. The room at the end of the East Hall got finished that autumn. Enzo did the last third of the wall himself, badly, in one evening, and Mari let him, and then had it redone properly by a man from Corona, who charged them $400 and did not ask a single question about anything. The crib came out of the box in the spring. Mari's daughter is 2 now. She has her father's ridiculous hair and her mother's flat refusal to be moved on any point. And she is the loudest thing that has ever happened to that house. And on Tuesdays, all 3 of them go to Prince Street. 6 minutes. Rain or not, because Enzo Barone kept a promise for 7 years, and then he broke it. And Mari has never once let him call it breaking. She calls it what it was. Somebody finally asked him a question, and waited for the answer. Here's what I keep going back and forth on with this one. Enzo let 400 men believe he was less than a man for 7 years, and he did it on purpose, because the lie was armor, and the truth had her name in it. Some of you are going to call that strength. Some of you are going to call it 7 years of hiding that cost him everything, and nearly cost him the chair. So tell me straight in the comments, was he protecting her, or was he protecting himself? And is there something you've let people believe about you? Something wrong? Something unfair, just because correcting it would have cost more than the lie? I read every single one of these. Tell me where you land.